A stocks and shares ISA is the ultimate wealth building tool, particularly if you want to retire early. But they're often misunderstood and people don't really know all of their benefits. There's quite a few secret hidden benefits that people just aren't aware of, or people misunderstand how they actually work. So in this video, hopefully it'll be the only stocks and shares ISA video you'll need to watch because it will include everything. But in particular, we're going to cover taxes, how they work, what taxes you will pay and won't pay, the allowance, how that works also with contribution, and a load of other things such as withdrawing your money, picking a platform, and so on. I'm gonna try and keep it as short and succinct as possible, and hopefully it'll be helpful. I'm gonna get straight into it, but before I do, just give a very quick overview. A stocks and shares ISA is one of the 4 different types of ISAs that we can use being from the UK. The other 3 are lifetime, cash, and innovative. And when it comes to a stocks and shares ISA specifically, it's just a type of account or a wrapper to hold your money. It's not actually the stocks and shares ISA that grows, it's the investments that are wrapped inside the stocks and shares ISA that grow. A very common question is, what return will I get? Well, it depends what you invest into. Generally speaking, if you're gonna invest into broad market index funds such as the US or the global economy, you can expect roughly about 7% over the long term, but that's a whole separate video, and I'll link some useful video you can watch up here, so check that one out afterwards. But it's the actual investments inside of the stocks and shares ISA account or wrapper that will grow and then give you your return. So number 1, let's talk about taxes, the taxes you will pay and won't pay. Once the money is actually inside of a stocks and shares ISA, you will never pay tax.
Yeah, boy.
So in particularly, you'll never pay any capital gains tax. So when your investments go up in value, you won't pay any tax on that. Dividend tax, when your stocks or your funds pay yourself dividends, you won't pay any tax on that at all. And number 3, bond interest. If you invest in bonds and you get some interest, then you won't pay any tax at all. So there's 0 tax once the money's inside of a stocks and shares ISA on capital gains, dividends, or bond interest. And this is ultimately why that's so powerful, because once the money is inside of that wrapper, you never have to pay any tax. If the money wasn't inside that stocks and shares ISA wrapper, then you potentially might have to pay capital gains tax and dividend tax, which over the long term, if you have 6 or 7 figures inside of your stocks and shares ISA, that could be a good chunk, 10, 20, 30% that you'd lose to these various different taxes. But we do have to pay tax still, and that is before the money actually goes inside of a stocks and shares ISA. So we earn some money from our job, from OnlyFans, however you do it, whether you make your money, whatever method you use. And what you then do is you'll pay income tax, national insurance, and whatever other taxes you pay. You pay all of that, you then receive the money into your bank account, which is your net pay, and then you contribute from your net pay into your stocks and shares ISA. So of course, the government are always gonna tax us at some point, and it's the opposite to pension. With a pension, we avoid tax today because it comes out of our gross pay, and then we pay tax down the line. Whereas with a stocks and shares ISA, we pay tax today in the form of income taxes and national insurance. The money goes in to a stocks and shares ISA from our net pay, but because we pay tax already at the point of earning the money then grows tax-free forever, which is potentially a good thing, because generally speaking, taxes go up over time. Depending on the government, they generally want to try and tax us more, whether it's through direct taxes, stealth taxes, indirect taxes, whatever it is. So by paying tax today, you've paid the tax, done and dusted, and you can then put it in a stocks and shares ISA, and assuming they don't change the laws and rules of how it works, that money will then grow tax-free forever. There was some chat about introducing some 100k ISA cap. It was only a think tank study. I don't think they would introduce that because it would just deter people from long-term investing so much. So there's no cap at the moment, and hopefully it stays that way. Which brings me on to point number 2, that there's currently no lifetime limit. So your ISA can grow to whatever you want it to.
Oh my God!
Hypothetically, you can get your ISA to millions of pounds and there's no limit. On pensions, up until recently, where they scrapped the lifetime limit, there was a lifetime limit on your pension, whereas an ISA doesn't have a lifetime limit and it never has. So hypothetically, if you put money in your ISA and you're some superstar trader, you can make yourself millions and billions and never pay any tax on it whatsoever. Number 3, and this is a very powerful point about stocks and shares ISAs, is tax-free withdrawals at any age. So as we know, as the money is growing, you don't pay any dividend tax or capital gains tax, but when you actually come to withdraw the money, you also don't pay any taxes at all. I'm making a lot of comparisons to pensions because a stocks and shares ISA and a pension are the main sort of 2 types of account in the UK to invest for the long term, so it's good to compare them. But a pension is the opposite. We have to wait until we get to a certain age, 55, going up to 57 in 2028, and we potentially may have to pay some tax. Whereas stocks and shares ISA is completely flexible. You can withdraw the money whenever you want, and there's not an age limit. So hypothetically, if you can build up your portfolio to millions of pounds by the time you're 45, you can then start living off of that money tax-free, because you can withdraw it at any age. And yeah, that's a huge benefit, that flexibility of a stocks and shares ISA. Not only are any withdrawals completely tax-free and penalty-free, you've not got to pay a fee to withdraw the money from your ISA, but you can also, number 3, take them at any age whenever you want. Which means if you built up your ISA to a decent sum and you wanted to withdraw some money for a deposit on a house, you can do that. If you wanted to let it compound for 20, 30 years and start living off of it in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you can do that as well. So the flexibility is a really important factor, and particularly if you want to retire early, it's just great because you can live off of that money before traditional retirement age. I think this is number 4, and this is a very important one and where a lot of misconceptions come, and it's about the allowance and the contributions. So the allowance that we get across the 4 different types of ISAs that I mentioned at the start of the video is £20,000. So in our stocks and shares ISA, each tax year we can put in 20 grand, which, first of all, saying that is a lot of money. I imagine 99% of people will never max it out. I've never maxed it out. Even investing 5 or 10k is a huge sum of money. If you're lucky enough to get 20k in there, you're probably on a very high salary. Don't be deterred from using it if you won't get 20k in there. Most people don't and never will. And as I said, I never have. Hopefully I will, but I never have so far. It's one of those things where the more you can use of the allowance, the better, of course, but just use what you can and what you can afford to invest every year. So that £20,000 allowance is just on contributions. It's not on gains, it's not on dividends, it's not on any of that. So hypothetically, if you put in £5,000 to your stocks and shares ISA on the first day of the tax year, it then grows by £5,000, so it doubles. So now you have, next day, let's just say, so now you have £10,000 in your stocks and shares ISA. You still have £15,000 left you can contribute because you've only put in 5k initially. That 5k gain you made does not form part of your contribution. And similarly, just say you got £1,000 in dividends across that year. Don't know what stock you'd be paying, what's that, like a 20% dividend, but let's just say you put in 5k on the first day of the tax year, you get £1,000 in dividends, you still have £15,000 of contributions that you can put in to utilise the full 20k ISA allowance. So this is a very common confusion, but the allowance is only on contributions, money you directly put in. And the money you put in doesn't necessarily even need to be invested, it just needs to be in there. So let's just say it's the last day of the tax year and you have £1,000 of your stocks and shares ISA allowance left. You've used up £19,000, you have £1,000 left. As long as you put that £1,000 in there, even if it's just sitting in cash in your stocks and shares ISA, that's still going to utilise your full allowance. So it doesn't matter if the money is invested or not, as long as it's in your stocks and shares ISA, inside that account, then you're using up your allowance. Which is why before the end of the tax year, a lot of people will just chuck a load of cash in their stocks and shares ISA to utilise any remaining allowance rather than using up and eating into next year's allowance. So that was a lot of numbers there. We went through a lot, but hopefully that will make sense. It is a 20k allowance. It has been for years. I'm hoping that doesn't change. I think if the government were to make any changes to try and hit us, it would probably be to the ISA allowance, although of course hopefully they don't and it stays at 20k going forward. But that is how the ISA allowance and contributions work, and any money you have from previous tax years will simply just roll over. Just say you invest £1,000 in this tax year, it grows by £1,000 and you have £2,000 at the end of the tax year. When the new tax year starts, you'll simply get a new allowance and that £2,000 will stay in there and continue growing across the years. The only thing that happens when we go from the 5th of April to the 6th of April is any remaining ISA allowance that isn't used, the £20,000, is lost. It doesn't carry forward, and we get a brand new £20,000 allowance that we can start eating into and feasting on for the next tax year. Now finally, let me cover platforms and also switching in terms of how many ISAs you can contribute to and how that whole process works, because that also brings a lot of confusion to people. So in terms of platforms, there is a ton of platforms in the UK. Generally speaking, there are some platforms that are more DIY, where you have more autonomy and more control over what you invest into. And there are then other platforms that are more robo-advisors, where you sort of set a risk tolerance, answer some questions, and then they invest your money based on that. Generally speaking, DIY platforms have more choice and lower fees, but then robo-advisor platforms do more for you. I personally prefer DIY platforms because I want to have choice of what my money goes into, and also of course lower fees is better. But of course investing is the main aim, so whichever one you use is great and it's certainly better than nothing. Right, so this is the confusion. You can only contribute to one of each type of ISA, and remember there's 4 different types of ISAs. You can only contribute to one of each type of ISA each tax year. So let's just focus on stocks and shares ISAs because that's what this video is about. If you have old stocks and shares ISAs, they can stay there and continue growing and continue paying dividends as well. So any dividends will be tax-free, any gains are tax-free, but you can only contribute to one stocks and shares ISA each tax year. So just say you've had a Trading 212 stocks and shares ISA for 5 years, you've built up that pot to £10,000. This tax year, you decide to use Vanguard. As soon as you contribute to your Vanguard stocks and shares ISA, you can't contribute to your Trading 212 anymore because you've made the choice to use Vanguard as your stocks and shares ISA provider for this tax year. The Trading 212 stock and shares ISA with £10,000 in can still continue to grow, compound, pay dividends, but you can't contribute any money to that because you're contributing to your Vanguard one. So you can only contribute to one of each type of ISA each tax year. So technically, you can open up a brand new stocks and shares ISA on a different platform each tax year, but once you've started contributing to that one, you sort of are committed to that one for the next following tax year. Said tax year quite a lot there. Take a shot every time I said tax year. There is sort of one way around this, and that's if you switch platforms. So I switched platforms years ago. I was using the High Street Bank and I then switched to Vanguard. But if you switch platforms, it's generally quite easy. You do it online, fill in the form, the 2 platforms will sort it all out for you. What normally happens is one platform will liquidate all your investments, get your cash, send the cash over to the other platform, and you can then use that to invest. So that's sort of the one way around it if you initiate a switch, and you can then use that platform you switch to going forward to contribute for the tax year. But this is actually quite handy because you can keep old stock and shares ISAs open as new platforms have new deals and maybe change over time. If a platform falls out of favor, don't just stick with it for the sake of it. You can open up a new stocks and shares ISA and start contributing to a new, better one if maybe they have what you want to invest into, or lower fees, or better customer service, or whatever it is. Whew. And I think that right there wraps up this video. Hopefully an ultimate guide to stocks and shares ISAs, probably the best wealth building tool in the UK, particularly if you're younger and want to retire early before traditional pension age. I hope it was helpful. If you enjoyed it, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.